Hi, I'm Declan and I'm here with Rob and with Sarah. We all work at /4 Hector's House. And today we're going to be going through some questions people have submitted on the topic of suicide, suicidality, and mental health. So some of these questions could be very complicated, can be very complex and kind of nuanced, and they might be a little bit triggering for anyone who's listening. So anything that does upset you or cause you distress, make sure you do something afterwards to take care of yourself, whether that's going through some resources that we have available, getting in touch with somebody that you feel safe to talk to, or getting in touch with a hotline or a helpline or anything else. So these are questions that we ask people to submit on the topic of suicide. The questions were all submitted anonymously. We did say there are some questions we may not be able to answer because of safeguarding problems. There were also some questions which were pretty much the same thing, just with slightly different wording. So there may be a couple of questions that we've rolled into one kind of bigger question in order to just give a more definitive answer and not repeat ourselves more than we need to do. So I guess we should just kind of get into it, really. So the first question we had submitted was on the use of the phrase committed suicide, which we actually had a couple of questions pertaining to, essentially saying, why is it not okay to say committed suicide? So Rob, Sarah, I don't know if you want to take that one first.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think a lot of people are becoming aware now that we've moved away from the language of committed suicide to language that's more empathetic, like taking own life or died by suicide. And the reason that this is the Suicide Act came into play in, I think it was 1961, which stopped suicide being a crime. So before then, before the 1960s, which actually isn't that long ago, the Suicide Act came into play, and it meant that suicide was no longer a crime. So we're trying to move away from the language that it is criminal or is something to be stigmatized or ashamed of, because it's no longer a crime. And yet we still use the word committed. For example, committed a burglary or committed something else. So we're trying to move away from that stigmatizing language to more empathetic language, like died by suicide or taken his or her life. Or I think Robert, we heard one recently that was
Suicided.
suicided, because
Yeah,
the history of the word is actually can be used as a verb.
yeah, it is to do with language. I mean, when someone um, had attempted suicide, then there would be a police officer outside your door in hospital, and it's in the end, it's all about language and understanding that we need to be so careful with all language in that we try and talk about not using the phrase "suck it up," man up, and things like that, and understanding that language can hurt. For those of us bereaved by suicide, to have that idea that someone has committed a crime, but it is so difficult, and it's a matter of just trying to go around it. So when I was first doing this, I would pick anyone up who said it immediately. So I'd be at conferences, and I was at a conference the other day, an NHS conference, and it was used there by someone because it slips off the tongue. But it's a matter of just saying, just being aware and understanding. I no longer actually, because I've been doing this for a while now, I don't tend to pick people up on it other than if they ask the question, but just to say, just understanding that the whole thing and it's about stigma, but it goes into much more about oral use of language, to be understanding and to be really careful about the words we use all the time as to how they can come across. So I think if people understood why we would prefer you not to use that, but you see it in the media and sometimes even on TV, they tend to say now took their own life on the main channels, but occasionally it's in even in the newspapers. But it's just generally a great thing if you can understand why we'd prefer not to use that language, because anyone who's struggling with thoughts of suicide or with low mood, the idea that is a problem and that you're stigmatized by that would discourage or wouldn't encourage you to reach out for help, because it's all wrapped up in that, I think.
It's interesting as well, just to point out that even in this kind of industry, for lack of a better term, where we have to talk about these things all the time, the use of language just does change. and it is a little bit contentious. So sometimes a phrase will come in which becomes the norm for a while, and then it might become problematic because of either other events or because it just hasn't been looked at in as much detail as it could have done. In the same way, phrases like survivor and victim, those aren't phrases that everyone's comfortable with. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to people who have died by suicide or as a result of suicide. Everyone's going to have a very different opinion on what exactly those words mean and what they imply. So yeah, I think the important thing is to note that we try and stay away from it because of the criminal history of the word. If you hear someone saying it, or if you catch yourself saying it, don't beat yourself up about it. It's not the be all and end all. It's an interesting history behind the use of that phrase and why it's trying to be phased out. So yeah, thank you for your answer on that one. The next question we had was asking if it's safe to ask someone whether they're feeling suicidal, and whether or not by asking them you could be planting a seed in someone's head. So Sarah, I know this is something you and I have talked about a lot, so do you want to pick that one up first?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a big myth surrounding suicide that if I ask the question or if I say the word suicide, that's going to suddenly inspire someone to have those thoughts or take that action. So I know a lot of people who will use words like, you're not going to do anything silly, are you? Or you're not going to harm yourself in some way. So by using the word suicide, I promise you're not going to be putting that thought in someone's head. It is absolutely safe to do so. We use a really good example in the training that we do of, if I ask you, Dec, to give me your entire skateboard collection and guitar collection, would you give it to me just because I've asked you? No, because you hold value in that, right? And it's the same with the life.
Yeah.
Just because I've asked the question doesn't mean you go, oh, actually, I'll really consider giving Sarah all my belongings. And same with you, Rob, with your car or, a prized possession that you have. So it's exactly the same with life. If you value it and you want to live, it's not going to put the thoughts in suicide. If anything, you're showing that person that you are someone that they can come to with big problems, that you're not going to shy away from this big issue. By directly asking someone, are you having thoughts of suicide? Not, are you planning to hurt yourself or are you going to do something silly? You're showing them that you take this really seriously and you're someone who they can come to.
Yeah, that's a really important point. The question is, are you thinking you're doing something silly? Well, if someone is having thoughts of suicide, and that builds up to the pain that they actually are thinking about it, that the thought of it and the doing it is not a silly thing. So they go, no, I'm not thinking of doing something silly. They wouldn't answer the question. But if you said, are you having thoughts of suicide? And they say yes. And often the relief that someone has actually said it, and we've had cases where people said, actually I am, but I hadn't thought that. I didn't realize I was having thoughts of suicide. By asking the direct question, this isn't from us, this is from people who are, very experienced in the field, say it's absolutely safe to ask if someone's having thoughts of suicide. And I volunteer on a helpline, and it's in terms of our risk, which we're always watching in any conversation, where is the risk? We will always ask that question. And sometimes I've asked that question when I haven't necessarily, and I'm sure we'll go into this in some other question, haven't necessarily thought that would be a good point to ask that question, because of they're not actually giving me what we call red flags. But someone says, yes, I am. And the important thing is someone can actually have thoughts. So when they're talking about things that could sound quite ordinary. So never be worried about asking that question. Actually, in a conversation that isn't necessarily because someone is expressing really big worrying words, that's the thing. So it's absolutely safe to ask that question.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's a very, very important one to cover. We had another question saying, can a person ever recover from feeling suicidal?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. I have known people that have struggled for many years, and then with just consistent help, consistent support, have found the hook that has moved them forward and has meant that I'm seeing people now where at one point it seemed really dark, it seemed really hard, and they've come through. I've known people where we can have 2 conversations and they're able to move forward because of what they've needed and offloaded. But yes, absolutely, with support, with help, and that means medical support, that means being heard, that means, sometimes psychiatrists, that means psychological therapy, that means assistance with your GP, all of those things. And then being heard and listened to, which is so, so important, that yes, and people can move forward and can live and find hope again and be able to get through it. It is entirely possible, yes.
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
I think it is worth just pointing out as well that obviously with what we do and how the different ways in which we engage in supporting people, we've seen it happen firsthand. It's not just, this isn't just us saying it because it looks like a good thing to say. There are people who we know on a first name basis who didn't think they'd ever be able to have a life where they didn't feel suicidal, and now they do. So that's a very important one to cover. The next question, if I can find the right place on the list, is someone's asking, are suicide attempts just a call for help and a need for attention?
They are a call for help and they deserve attention. It's difficult. It's because that could lead you to saying, well, are they just attention seeking? Well, we all deserve attention, and if someone is, having thoughts of suicide, or then intent moves forward, then they do need help. So yes, it could be a cry for help. We would much prefer that people can say, so if it's a line and we go from, say, 1 to 10, and 1 is I'm doing okay, all the way up to 10, my intent to take my life is really, really strong. What we would like you to do is come to us when you have less ideation, when you're thinking, actually, I'm really struggling. Today is not a good day. Why? And I've got things happening to me. And go, please, can I have some help? Yeah, please, can I have some help? And we say, yes, come to us for help. We're happy to help. Sometimes what happens when people go through thoughts, plan, means, time frame, is that what we call ideation is getting to the point when it's becoming intense and they can't cope anymore. That in actual fact, in order to get help, sometimes that we have to get to crisis, and that is okay too. What I'm saying is that it's not okay to think that it's just attention seeking. Never is it attention seeking, ever. It may be a cry for help, but I would much rather that you didn't need to cry for help. I'm okay with crying, actually. Crying is good, but you could ask for help way down at this scale and just say, I need help. So yes, it is, but it's never just attention seeking. I don't view it as that, and no one that I know that is supporting people at any level would see that, and that someone deserves that help, and it isn't, it's not just someone attention seeking. Absolutely not.
No, I totally agree, and it should never be. I think the problem with this is that it's reasons to dismiss an attempt of suicide or thoughts of suicide, and we should never dismiss that, no matter what stage they're at. You can't just say, oh, it's just a cry for help or just an attention-seeking act. No, those things, like you say, Rob, they're necessary, and that's okay to need help and need support. What it shouldn't be is a reason to dismiss or to ignore those behaviours or feelings.
And someone reaches out, and when we're wanting attention, we need it. That's why we're asking for help. And so it's again, it's language. It's a way of dismissing it by using that term. So I refute that, and I would be really angry with anyone that would say that. I'd have to listen to why they would be saying that about somebody, and saying, okay, but that's not my view. So it's again, a use of language which is dismissive, and the person, we all require it, and at the end of the day, we all need attention on every level of every day, and so we deserve it, and we should be given that love and care and attention. So I think it's great. People should ask for help, and we should seek attention.
The use of the phrase it was just a cry for help, that sort of phrase, that use of dismissing it because of that, you should be asking a question of, well, why was that person in such dire straits when it came to asking for help? And then the important thing is not to write it off, it's to find a way to get that help to that person, even if it's yourself, because I've heard people use that talking about their own experiences. Oh, I think I tried to kill myself once, but it was only a cry for help. It wasn't, I didn't mean it. It's like, well, but you meant that you needed help. So let's take that and work with that and get people the help that they need. The next question on our list, which I think kind of ties into that anyway, but the next question was, how would you know when to take someone's thoughts of suicide seriously? Which we've got a couple of questions that all sort of hover around the same topic. But so, for example, in fact, I'll tie that in because there's a question. The second to next question down and the one after that are all kind of tying into the same thing. So maybe if we bundle all these ones together. So we had a question saying, how do I know when to take someone's thoughts of suicide seriously? We also had a question saying, what are words to look out for before asking someone if they're feeling suicidal? And we had a question saying, are there any other signs of someone who might be thinking of suicide? I feel these are all very, very similar. So, Sarah, I know there's quite a lot of questions to take in one go, but yeah.
Do our best.
Three things. How would you know when to take someone seriously? What words should you look out for? And what other red flags should you be looking for?
Well, the beginning one, I think you always need to take someone's thoughts of suicide seriously, no matter at what stage. Even if, I think one of the questions alludes to maybe even being said as a passing joke, that still needs to be taken into account and taken seriously. And don't be afraid, again, just ask the question, because, by ignoring it or dismissing it, you don't want to know what the outcome is, and you've already spotted the sign. So once you see the sign that someone's having thoughts of suicide, and it could be that they directly tell you, you then have a responsibility. You have got choice, really. You can either choose to ignore it, or you can choose to ask the question and act upon it. So if someone says that they're having thoughts of suicide, always take it seriously. It might not be that they have a plan or that they have intent to die by suicide, but if they're having thoughts, that's like almost like level 1. They need that extra bit of support, and by reaching out to Hector's House or Shout 85258 or Samaritans, they'll be able to get that person to safety.
Yeah, I think so. It leads back to the idea that asking that question won't cause someone to have it. And you can ask that question in a conversation where someone is saying, oh, things are really tough at the moment. This has happened. I've got lots of things happening at school or at work that are really pushing me down, or I'm feeling isolated with my friends. And sometimes just by where someone's giving you a load of stuff and you're thinking, okay, you could say to them, that sounds really hard. In all of this that's happening to you, that sounds so hard. Have you got to have you got to a point when you're having thoughts of suicide? And just because someone's showing you that there's lots of things happening, you could ask that question without them actually having to say, I'm feeling so bad, I'm having thoughts of suicide, because that is the suicide prevention, where someone's saying, this is what's happening, this is what's going on in my life, things are really sort of piling up. And then you go, yeah, sure, I hear that. That's really hard for you. So I can imagine that's hard going through that. In this, are you having thoughts of suicide? And they might go, yeah, actually, I am. Okay, and then we talk about the next thing. So often, and that talks about words and flags that we would say now, we would say, what are the flags going on? If someone's saying, I don't see any point in the future, I've loss of hope, I'm a burden to my family, those are significant flags in a conversation where I would be asking, are you having thoughts of suicide? Because if someone's loss of hope or they're feeling a burden, that tends to be heavy. But you can be asking that question way back in a conversation with someone who's telling you that they've got a lot going on, which is hard and heavy for them. So, did we ask the question about all the words that you would want to be looking at as well as
so we were one part of that question was, what are the words to look out for, words/red flags to look out for before asking someone?
The ones that we always talk about is loss of hope. I feel a burden. No one's going to miss me. It would be a relief for my family if I wasn't here. Those are significant red flags. But there is also this understanding that people can get to that, having thoughts of suicide, just by things stacking up without those flags. If you're getting those sort of words, I would take those as a red flag. Sarah, what's your thoughts?
Totally. I think we talk about this a lot, where people will always often invite you to talk about suicide, and it's just whether or not you pick up on those invitations. So it could be those words, it could be some of the signs that we're going to go through in a minute that are non-verbal, or it could be them directly saying, I'm having thoughts of suicide, even if they, like you say, if they say it as a passing remark. So the opportunity to talk about suicide is always there when you know that somebody's going through a tough time. But definitely, I feel a burden. Often as well, if someone's quite, far down the line, they might say goodbye in a certain way, or, well, that's not going to matter next month. And you might be like, well, that's unusual that they might say that, or, I'm not worried about my exams because I won't be here. Like, it can be as honest as that. So anything like that would be an invitation to ask the question about suicide.
Something I've sort of seen here and there, and it's a little bit more nuanced, is if someone not necessarily saying goodbye, but sort of thanking you for whatever, they're like, oh, I just wanted to say you've been, it's that use of past tense, I think, is the thing to watch out for. So when someone's saying, I just wanted to say you've been a really great friend, or you've been really helpful, or it's been really nice knowing you, that sort of language as well, they're suddenly no longer talking in the present tense. Everything's becoming past, and it's a way of sort of indicating they're already checking out and moving on. So yeah, like we said before, language is very, very complicated and very nuanced. So I feel like what you're saying is any mention of thoughts of suicide you should ask questions, even if it's a subtle throwaway thing, where someone's going, well, everyone would be better off if I wasn't here. You can ask them, what do you mean by that? So,
well, I would also question whether in ordinary life, where we could ask this question early on, rather than even when we get to, especially when you get to those red flags of what you've just explained there, Dave. But noticing that, knowing that someone is going through a difficult relationship breakup or divorce, they've mentioned that they're being bullied at school, they've mentioned their exam pressures, that it would be okay to actually say, yeah, this sounds hard. With all of this, are you having thoughts of suicide? Because really early on in how things can actually stack up and make you get to that point so this is just from my point of view. I'd love that question to be asked way back in that scale of where things become hard in life. And that if we're brave enough to do that, I mean, Sarah's talking about these invitations, which is amazing that we can watch for that, and we do that. But if we can then just generally in life check in with enough people to know that, yeah, actually life is hard, life is tough, and we need to check in on them and ask that question, and they'll say, no, I'm not. Actually, I'm fine, but thank you for asking that question, and we can move on. And they say, well, I may ask it again, depending on how things are going. And that we treat it with that much ease. I think that would be a good thing.
That's a very good thing to bring up. The only thing we kind of didn't really cover, or at least I feel we didn't cover in that, was other red flags and signs to look out for. I think we were very heavy on the language people will use and the way in which they'll talk, but I don't feel we really got into anything else, whether it's someone's demeanor or someone's other actions. So are there any other signs in particular that we know pop up when someone's beginning to feel suicidal?
I would say the people in your life very well. and you know what their eating habits are, sleeping habits are, what their personality is like on good days. So it's very hard to say universally what the signs might be. We can talk about some of the signs that tend to be universal. However, if you know someone who usually gets 8 hours sleep and they're really keen on getting their 8 to 10 hours and they love their sleep, suddenly they're not sleeping. Or if you notice that a person who's usually really outgoing and socializes loads and wants to be out with friends all the time is all of a sudden withdrawn. Now, there are people out there who don't sleep very much and people who tend to be more introverted and don't like spending time with other people. So it's about knowing the individual themselves. We can talk about life circumstances, a relationship breakdown, maybe abuse of some sort, some kind of trauma. But sometimes people will come to us and say, I've got nothing that I can talk about my life being in any way traumatic or bad, and yet I'm feeling this way. And there's almost like a guilt on top of that comes along with it, like, I don't understand. So it's about knowing the people in your life and how they operate and what they're like, so then that you notice the irregularities in their behavior. Obviously, the big signs, like if you know a friend is going through really stressful exams or a breakup of a relationship, or they've just been told some bad news at the doctors, for example, those are the big things that we go, okay, this person's going to need that little bit extra support. And like Rob said, if we can ask that question even earlier, then fantastic. But just keeping an eye on like the little differences, like we talk about the signs, which is sleep interference in any way, if it's sleeping too much or too little, isolating themselves, giving away possessions, losing interest or no interest in the things that usually would bring them joy. And what's the last one, Rob?
Loss of hope.
Loss of hope, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a bit, obviously, again, as we say, that's kind of like the big one. So
I think it is just watching for that change in behaviour of someone and going, that's not quite right. And Sarah's point about, sometimes we don't know why we're feeling what we're feeling. Everything in our life is actually going really well. We should be fine, but we're feeling something. And then what gave us joy, what really interests us, no longer does. That's really important. Where that thing that used to do it for you doesn't do it for you anymore, and you need to find out how can we get you back there, because that means something. Because that has changed. So if your mate is no longer doing what you would normally expect them to do, go, this is, and just ask. Try and communicate with them, see what's going on, find out. But yeah, if one of your people, their behaviour has changed, that's an indication.
So language being the most obvious signs you can see, but the red flags that are maybe a little bit more complex would be changes in people's behaviour from whatever their normal behaviour is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question on this particular set of questions, then we've got a bunch that came through in sort of random places as well, which I'll go through. There's a question on here which just says, what do I do if I am worried about someone? Which I know we've recently uploaded a video talking about that, and there's 1,000 places you could go to for help. I think the main thing is just that you do something about getting them help. So if you were worried about someone, it's also a bit of an open question. It doesn't exactly explain what they mean, but they're worried about someone. I'm assuming what they mean is if they're worried about someone being or feeling suicidal, where do you begin helping that person? So, I mean, Sarah, what's step one if you're worried about someone?
Okay, I would say step one would be to get help for yourself and understand what it might mean that if someone's having thoughts of suicide, if you're worried about someone, say, for example, you've seen all the signs we've just talked about, and you go, oh my gosh, I think this person might be having thoughts of suicide. Step one for me would be equip yourself first. So I would either call a helpline, you've got Papyrus, you can call Samaritans or get in touch with shout at 85258 or the Hector's House team and say, these are the signs I've noticed, what can I do to help? Hopefully what they will do is to give you the confidence to ask the question for that person, are you having thoughts of suicide? The most important part of asking that question, the scariest bit of it, is the answer. So if it's a yes, what we don't want you to do is feel, oh my God, I didn't want that to be the answer and now I'm going to panic. I don't know what to do with this information now. So ideally, getting yourself prepared is the best step for, first of all. Second then would be to ask the question, sit down with the person. We've got a really good document if anyone needs it, which is how to ask the question and what area to ask the question. For example, we don't want to stage an intervention here, going for a walk or being in the car, or making it very, safe space, of course, but making sure that person doesn't feel too scared to say, yes, I am. Maybe they might just go, actually, no, I'm not, because this is quite intense. So making sure that the environment is safe to ask the question. And then if the answer is yes, how do we then, what steps do you then take to keep that person safe? So ensuring that that, for example, Samaritans are open 24/7, Hector's House are not open 24/7, but if you send us an email, we will answer the next working day, for example. Or do you have a list of people that you can contact? Do you know how to keep that person safe? And what can we do? What can we do then to support you? The third step would be, let's say, for example, you've done your research, you've asked the question, they've said yes, you've got that person to a place of safety. The last step to me would be keeping yourself well, because that is incredibly stressful, especially if it's someone that you care for deeply. Like, we do this job all the time and with people, and we end up caring for them deeply, and it is a worry sometimes, especially if you're a parent or a sibling or a teacher. So what can you do then to keep yourself safe and well? So making sure you're doing your self-care, your self-maintenance, ensuring that you are not feeling totally drained, because we don't want that either.
You've covered so many points there, Sarah. I think the only thing I would say from my experience, which, for example, with Hector, where I sort of vaguely knew he self-harmed, but I didn't know much about it. And so in what I would like to have done was known that I can go on to the British Society of Psychiatrists, I can download a leaflet about self-harm so I could understand it, so that I could then go to him and say, tell me more about what's going on for you. And then the important thing is to then, you've already mentioned, how can you have conversations with people? How can you open conversations? Well, it's a matter of saying, how do I find that out now? Mind and Papyrus and we have resources in how to open a conversation. And then more importantly, apart from what we've been saying before about asking the question about, are you having thoughts of suicide? It's then knowing that as normal human beings who are not trained, we can listen and what we call hold space for people to be able to tell you what's going on. And then you collectively together work out what their next step is going to be, so that they have some autonomy in this. We don't just pick them up and take them somewhere, because you may not be trained, but it's really important that the person who is then maybe accepting or talking about help or listening and experiencing can then be able to help with you and guidance make their decisions of what they need. So the arming yourself first with some knowledge if it's something specific. So for example, with self-harm, I wish I had downloaded a leaflet and understood it, to then go and have that conversation and sit with someone and then listen. We've mentioned before, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen to what's going on. Try to keep your hands under your knees. I always explain it when I'm trying to listen. I am really trying to listen and train to listen, and to not fix, and to listen to that person. And then if we need to keep them safe, it's knowing how you would keep them safe, what you would do. If necessary, you dial 999, or you take them to A&E, or you go to a helpline, or Samaritans, or Shout, or come to us. But do not underestimate the power of you as a human being, giving that person time and space and listening to them and allowing them, and without judgment and without fixing, let them express what they're feeling. And there so many times people will say to you, I just needed to tell someone what I'm actually thinking and feeling. And do not underestimate what you can do as a human being. We all learn CPR, and we all learn that song to actually keep up the pumping of the CPR, and we can do it with 999 if we need to. But we can do that with everybody, with our thoughts and how we're feeling. We can sit with them and listen. But Sarah's point is that just get yourself do some homework, get yourself knowing helplines and what you need to do, help to have the Stay Alive app in case someone needs that. So just get some resources around you, but do not underestimate how much you can do as a human being by listening.
Can I just ask about one thing that you said, which is where you said about you were vaguely aware that Hector was self-harming to some degree, but you didn't kind of know how to get into it. Was that through fear of upsetting him, or because you were too upset about knowing that to broach the topic with him?
No, I didn't understand the importance of it.
Okay.
Just thought, seriously, in the, it's an important point. It's one thing that I wish I had looked into and researched more, because Belinda's mum knew about it and things, but I didn't go, I wonder what that's about. So I wasn't curious. I didn't worry about it. Just thought it was a thing that would be okay. Whereas knowing what I know now and the work we know now, I know why someone may do that and what they're trying to express and the pain that they may be feeling, and how important it is. And therefore, what my message is to people is what someone is experiencing or what they're going through. If you can find out a little bit about it before you broach. So if, say, for example, you're worried about something for someone, if you can do a little bit of research, just so you have a little bit of knowledge to give you that, where you go, okay, I might understand a bit more before I sit and try and listen to them. But yeah, it was the lack of curiosity and not understanding that was important.
So would you say that's because of the social stigma that self-harming is a sort of a trivial teenage cry for help sort of pursuit?
I think that's how it's seen now.
Yeah.
When it was not something I'd ever come across before Hector self-harmed. And it wasn't something that we made a big fuss of or understood as a inverted commas normal family. And now, because of the work we do, and what I understand is how much it comes up in conversations with young people, is how important it is for us all to understand that topic and to actually be armed with that topic. 11, 12 years ago, when I was effectively a normal person doing a normal day job, it didn't come across my radar, which is absolutely horrendous. In actual fact, I was on a BBC, I was on a local radio being interviewed, and I mentioned self-harm, and the psychiatrist said at the point, well, didn't you understand that? I said, what that meant? I said, no, I was just a normal person. I had no idea what it meant. And that, and that's the same with all of this, in terms of suicide, in that unless you've been affected by it, and unfortunately lots of people may be affected by it, and people that they know, a couple of blocks away, but in the end, it's understanding about us as human beings and our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and patterns and what happens to us. So yeah, and that's part of this trying to learn more to help, I think.
So I would tie that back to earlier on talking about attempted suicides being just a cry for help, in commas, is the same way self-harm is a cry for help. These things are cries for help, but they're not just cries for help. It's important that we treat those for what they are and give them the respect and the credence of seeing how we can then help that person, because those aren't healthy ways for someone to process their emotions and their feelings.
No, so if we self-harm is a coping mechanism for someone. It's really nuanced, really difficult. So we would always ask for someone to maybe consider a safer method, depending on what they're doing. But self-harm is someone saying, I'm in pain, and it can be that they're feeling pain or they're feeling numb, and therefore this is something they use. And I would say to anyone that in the same way as if someone is having thought suicide, someone who may potentially be self-harming, and that can be alcohol abuse, it can be drug abuse. There's something going on. There's pain there. We need to understand the pain. We need to understand why someone would need to numb or express in that way. It is, as we said before, it was a cry for help thing. They deserve help. It may be the only way they can express the pain they're in, to say, actually, I'm in this much pain, I can express this to you physically. And it's understanding that and going, what does that mean? And that's my point, is that understanding and maybe doing a bit of research as well to understand something. But yeah, from my personal stance is that anybody who is self-harming in any way needs such careful listening to and help to find the resources they need to be able to move forward from that and to be able to live well. I have full of compassion and care for someone who may be thinking of self-harm as well, in any method they use.
I think a big thing with self-harm that gets overlooked is eating disorders are a form of self-harm. It's oftentimes there's huge overlapping factors in why someone is, people use an eating disorder as a way to disappear, as a way of trying to physically, keep being smaller and smaller until they're gone. And it's a similar mindset, and there's a huge overlap there. And I think it's an observable red flag in someone's behavior.
And yeah, so absolutely. So all of these things, change behaviors or anything where someone is experiencing something, we need to understand why. So I think it goes back to the thing of if you're going to ask the question, if you're going to sit with someone, try and, if you can, just understand a little bit, so that if they say something, you go, okay, I understand. I'm not going to say, why do you do that? Yeah. That would be horrendous. What we want to do is go, I hear you. Tell me more. Share with me if you want to. What do you need? Well, the last thing we want to do is someone that says to you, I'm doing that, and you go, well, that's terrible. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself? Why would No, that's about, we need to be non-judgmental and listen. And yeah, that's that, and that's really hard to do that. It is, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, and to be honest, on the helpline all the time, it comes in constantly. My urge to self-harm and or having thoughts of suicide. So it is interwoven. So the next question on our list is someone asking, should I worry if I have friends who joke about killing themselves? Which is quite a vague question, because in what severity are they joking about it? How often are they joking about it? To me, that seems like something where the person, and if they're sort of making those jokes more often, if you're seeing changes in their behavior, or about changes in their circumstances that are going alongside that, or if they never used to make jokes like that, that's when it's really time to worry. We've all got friends who are just very edgy and have a dark sense of humor, and they'll say all kinds of things that they don't mean and that are less of a concern. So I think it's always something to pay attention to, in my opinion. But how would you know when to really not view that as nothing to worry about? It's an expression. It's really difficult. It's almost an everyday expression. This job is killing me, and I think in the end it comes a little bit down into context as to when it's being said, as opposed to someone having a sort of a one-to-one conversation with you and they say, things have got so tough, I'm thinking of killing myself. Whereas you say, oh, if they do that again, I'm going to kill myself. But they don't, they're just sort of saying something, if Manchester United do that, blah, 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 then I'm going to kill myself. So you could perceive that to say, well, you're just talking about a football team and it's not that important and it's just an expression. I think it's a matter then of feelings and then looking at behavior and thinking, okay, without out of context, so maybe they're saying it out of context, that actually it's in a way that they could actually be it could be an invitation, as Sarah talks about. So I don't think that at any time, and this goes back to my other point, I think it should be something we could all do all the time, that you say, when you said the other day, or you said earlier, you're thinking of killing yourself, can I just ask, was that do you mean that actually as a joke, or can I ask, are you actually thinking of killing yourself? And they go, no, that was just a joke about Manchester United, blah, blah, blah. And you go, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to ask you that question, and I may ask it again sometime in the future. So in the same way, then maybe look at the context, but maybe just ask the question again, and say, you just worried me a little bit about that. And I would be advocate for saying, always asking the question, actually. Make it easy. Just say, if you're ever in doubt, ask the question.
There's
Because Sarah said, we know there's evidence that you can't put it in someone's mind. Anyway, so they go, no, that's okay, it's fine. No, seriously, that was a joke. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe, but ask the question. Don't worry about it.
Just quickly as well, there was a really small bit of phrasing you used there that I think is the important part, is that you said you would be asking someone whether they meant it because you were worried by them saying it. So you're not making them feel guilty or ashamed of anything they've said. You're just saying, I was a little bit worried about what you said. So for my own sake of mind, I just want to ask this, because then you're not putting all the pressure on them, which I think is a very important way of phrasing that question.
Absolutely. And you've kind of said what I was about to say, which is, I think, you're showing that person that you are someone that they can turn to if they are feeling that way. So even if they are saying as a joke, and you go, like as Rob said, that worried me when you said that. Is everything okay? If you ever did have thoughts of suicide, you can turn to me. We can work this out. Even if they say, no, God, no, I was only messing. Maybe they won't do it again, which would be great. However, if they do, if it is serious, and maybe they've just gone, no, it's nothing. They know now that you are a safe person, which is so important. And the fact that you're even asking this question shows a huge amount of empathy, that you're a very, very caring friend. Because even if it is in jest, you care. And that person obviously really matters to you. So never be afraid to ask the question.
We have a question which we pretty much covered earlier, but I just wanted to get a very direct answer, partly because I can't remember the exact number. So we had someone asking, is committing suicide a crime? Which, Sarah, you said earlier, obviously we covered use of the term committing suicide, but also you said the Suicide Act was, when did you say that was?
It came in 1961.
Was that to decriminalise?
That was to decriminalise, yeah. So before 1961, it was a crime to take your own life. And I think attempts of suicide were punishable. You could be prosecuted for it. And then that law thankfully changed in 1961. However, that is where a lot of the stigma comes from, and where the language of committed suicide comes from.
We have someone asking, again, given the complexity of these things, quite a vague question, but just someone saying, do antidepressants work?
I'm not a medical practitioner or medically trained. I've researched and read some things, and it's important that you always work and talk to your medical people, your GP, your psychiatrist, about what they think you need. I know that there are different types of antidepressants which can do different things. I know that that things take time to build up, and at times that can be hard when these antidepressants are kicking in, to actually then make sure that works, and that you need to have support from your GP constantly through that, and support from maybe other sort of support as well at the same time, and having talking therapies, maybe having your psychiatrist or psychotherapist, and or living well through the things that we do with Eat, Move, Love, and that's really supportive in that. And then at some point in the future, if you do, and if your GP recommends that maybe that you change that you come down from taking antidepressants with GP support over a long period of time. And that's so we always, whatever we're doing at Hector's House or anything, it's always that you must go and see your GP and have support of the medical professionals, and whether they prescribe or not. I have taken antidepressants, and I found them really helpful for a period of time, and there is this build up, and then I found it supportive, and then with discussion with my GP, I wanted to do my very best to then try and wean off them so that I could then, if I could, use the methods that we talk about in living well to actually not be on them. And at the moment, I'm successful at that. There was a period of time when everything stacked up again and I went back onto them. And then I came safely back down again from them. Do they work? I don't know, I'm not a medical person. They helped me and I did it in line with my GP prescription. And we would always recommend that everything that we do is in line with your GP, your psychiatrist, your psychotherapist.
You would say they're a tool to have in the toolkit to help people through hard times. There's not, I think it's a thing we talk about quite often, that there isn't a one size fits all solution. For example, when people come to us looking for help, we don't recommend the same line of help to every person who comes to us. We try and find out exactly what their circumstances are in every possible way, whether that's age, gender, sexuality, geographical location. All of these things we take into account, the exact causes of what's going on in your life, any traumas, past or current. All of these things are factored in to then be used to find you the safest and the most effective form of help. And if that's something that is going to be folded into that because your GP thinks they might help, then they're just another tool to have in that toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial that you see a GP. It's crucial that you see your medical people. And part of what we know and what we know is that people with that often it's a matter of being able to provide time for them to be heard and to receive support, consistent support in how they're feeling, talking. I mean, and unfortunately, as we know, the NHS and the GPs, they don't have a huge amount of time to be able to listen to you. So with whatever that may be handled on that side, what we do know, and it's in general with what's going on, and they talk about social prescribing, which is actually coming from the NHS, is that all the Eat, Move, Love that we do and the listening and the connections with other things as well really are meaningful. And I'm not saying that, and certainly that's what we're always very clear that you must see your medical people as well. But what we do know is that in order to be able to continue to live well, all of the other things that we talk about are immensely important, particularly connection, particularly connecting with your people, finding things that give you joy and looking for things and getting into nature, looking after your sleep, eating well, hydration.
We have another question, which is, again, it's very vague considering what this is, but someone asked, is it normal to have some suicidal thoughts?
I would say it's possible. I would say that many people have had the odd thing that's come across that they've had a thought. And I am really comfortable that people may have thoughts and that they then come and talk to us about those thoughts, because it's, you know, and because the reason why I want to say that is that I want you to know that it's okay. Not, I want everyone to go around thinking of ending their lives, but I want you to know that if you are having those thoughts, that's okay, and come and talk to us, because we can have those thoughts. We can have stuff going on that just gets to the point you think, I can't cope. I just, all right, I'm having that thought. Okay, and so, I mean, they talk about 1 in 4 of us can have mental health challenges, and it depends what that means. But I think many people can have stresses piling into them that have a thought. It could be very passing, very transitory, but you can have it. But it's important to know that it's okay to then, actually, I've had that thought. Can I chat about this? Can I talk this through? And then, and I'm not being dismissive, but many times we can then talk to someone and probably in 50 minutes, an hour, take them from something that feels really hot and heavy to a calm, cool place, because they've expressed why they've had that thought. So I think it's entirely human, entirely normal, and entirely okay to then say, actually, can I have a chat? Put your hand up. That's this thing that I want right down this end of people saying, Can I have a chat, please?
Yeah, I was going to say that it depends on what your description of normal is, because like Rob says, we do have normal thoughts. We're human, of walking by a river and going, I could just chuck my phone in the river. But you're not, you just have that thought, don't you, that I could do something ridiculous, but then the thought passes. So I would say that it depends on the severity of these thoughts. Are they passing as in you could do it, it's something you could do, but you're not taking really seriously? Or is it something that's coming up a lot that you keep revisiting? But even if you don't intend to act on it, is it something that keeps reoccurring? If that was the case, I would reframe that as maybe a little flag to say, I might need some help, or I might need to talk to someone about these thoughts I'm having. Even if you don't have a plan or any intent to die by suicide, I would still use that as a little indicator that actually maybe it's time to go back to my GP, maybe it's time to reach out to Hector's house, maybe I'll give Samaritans a call just to explore whatever is going on.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a very good way of phrasing that. The last question we'll touch on for today is one that the question itself is a little bit leading, but I think the end point of what this question is very important for us to cover, which is someone has asked, how long does it take to get better? And I think what's important with this is we'll talk about how long it can take and how that can be an ongoing process. But the important thing that we always talk about is that you can get better. That's the really, really important thing. And it's so tempting when you're in any stressful situation to put a deadline on it, to be like, it's fine, because as soon as I get to that thing, I'll be better. Or as soon as I feel this way, I'm better. Words like cured and fixed are words that we avoid because they're too simple for this. So if someone was to say to you they've been feeling suicidal thoughts and when are they going to get better, how would you respond to that?
I believe that every day that you actively look after yourself and you reach out for that support and you are mindful of how you're looking after yourself, you're going to get that little bit stronger every day. And you will reach a level where there'll be days and days where you don't have any thoughts of suicide, and that's fantastic. But just knowing that we can do this, all of us do this. Myself, Robert, Declan, I'm sure you'll all agree that we've got days where we feel fantastic and days where we feel very low. So it's about understanding that, number one, you can't do it alone, and that's okay. When nobody would expect you to do it alone. Please reach out for help. It's like saying how long is a piece of string, I guess, isn't it really? But the best way of ensuring that it's sooner rather than later is by reaching out for help and getting a really good structured plan in place to make sure that you are well looked after, you're looking after yourself, you've been to your GP, you know what to do when those thoughts of suicide come.
It's just, I think, so when will they stop? I tell you, if you reach out for help, we can help you with those thoughts fairly quickly to say, can we bring you down? And that's what we do, so that we can help ease how it is for you in that moment. Then, as a human being, is exactly what Sarah's saying. It's like this all the time, and we would aim for balance in life. It's important to check in with yourself all the time. What is my number today? 1 is crap and 10 is great, and where am I? Where can I get to? And then what we have to come to the point is saying, what does it for me? If I'm slipping down today, as any of us three can do, because we've got, one has pressures. If I'm slipping down today, what do I need to do to top myself back up? So the idea then that if we're doing that we may not be at the point of 10 where on the suicide ideation scale where we're going, I'm having thoughts of suicide, because we're able to work on that all the time. What are the tips and tricks and tools that we have in our box when we need to up our self-care maintenance? So I think in terms of if someone is having thoughts of suicide, by reaching out to a helpline or to us or Shout or Samaritans, we can bring you down from that actually, but quite quickly, and to find you support quite quickly. But the important thing is this, just knowing that as a human being, it's a work in progress constantly. But it is possible to be able to do that and to live well. You can, with the support. It takes time, and it's your time, and it's no one else's time, but you will get there, and the support is there, and that you will be able to live well. And sometimes we have to revisit it, and sometimes we have to check in again, and sometimes we have to go through that process a little bit harder and tweak it up a bit more.
That's great. Yeah, I think to the question being, when does it get better, or how long does it take to get better? The answer is definitely that it will start getting better when you start getting the help that you need. And that's not going to happen until you reach out, or until someone asks you what's going on and they help you find those things that can help you begin moving forward. So it's a very important topic to cover, and I think it's a good. Rob, go on.
Yeah, but the point is what Sarah's saying. What we're saying here is that it's not like a leg. You break a leg, you go into A&E, they fix it, they tick the box, you're done. Living well and having thoughts and feelings and behaviours, even if we can get you to a point there, we've got to work on this constantly.
Yeah.
As opposed to a broken leg, which is, as Sarah said, fixed, mended, you're done. Our lives and being human is ongoing, and that's part of what we also try and assist you with as well.
So I think that's everything we had for today as far as questions that were sent in by people. So Rob and Sarah, thank you so much for your time and for your insights and your thoughts and everything else. Before we sign off, we just wanted to kind of remind everyone that if you are feeling thoughts of suicide and they're serious, call 999. That's what they're there for. There's also, you can get hold of the Samaritans, there's Papyrus, you can text shout to 85258. There's a lot of support you can go to directly, no matter kind of where you are and what the time is. If they're less pressing for time, there are other ways you can get in touch with other organizations. And then if you want to get in touch with us, the best way to do that is to email us at hihector@hectorshouse.org.uk. You can send us an email. As I said before, it could be about anything. It could be because you want to get involved in what we do. It could be because you're looking for support for yourself, for someone else. It could be because we vaguely touched on a topic that you really want to know more about. We might be able to give you another place to go to find out more information. Anything that you think we can help you with, we would love to help you with. So once again, it's hihector@hectorshouse.org.uk. From there, you can get in touch with us about anything that you want to do. Is there anything anyone wants to go through before we sign off?
I would just say that these topics can be very heavy, and sometimes after we've switched the computer off or come off YouTube, we can feel a little bit shaky or a little bit wobbly, or be thinking of a situation in our past that has happened that we didn't quite act in maybe the way we wanted to. So just being sure that to take 5 minutes now after this video ends, grab yourself a cup of tea or go for a walk or just have a meditation, whatever it is that brings you joy, just to refill up, because it can take its toll. That's all I'd say.
I completely agree. So
I'm gonna go get a cup of tea now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go make a coffee. I think that's my version of doing the same thing. Rob, what's your next thing?
The next take lunch.
Oh,
Lunch.
nice.
Gonna grab something for lunch. But
Nice.
thank you very much, Jack and Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. So anyone who's watching, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you submitted a question, thank you. If we didn't answer your question, we might do another one of these another day. As I said at the start, there were a couple of questions that we knew potentially, because of safeguarding things, we couldn't get into. So if there was something that was missed, it might be that. It might be that there were a few questions which were give or take the same thing. So we kind of rolled some topics up into one bigger question. But thank you for anyone who submitted something. And take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. All we have is each other. So thank you for your time. Goodbye, everyone.